Hello, Colin. Colin, can you hear me?
I can. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
So what's weird is you're on my entire screen and I don't see my.
What's that tell you?
Telling you, it's the.
I'm just in a little picture. And I see two of you.
Let me see.
Hello, Mike.
Oh, you can see me.
I can see you. I
And
can hear you.
Hear me.
How do you say your last name?
Pardon me?
Your last name, how do you say it?
It's like Ariel, the Little Mermaid, but put an H in front of it.
Okay, Ariel.
Okay, I can hear you both and I can see you both, so that's a positive.
Wonderful.
Okay.
It's like the old-fashioned tech support when they ask you, did you unplug it and plug it back in? This thing just told me to refresh the browser and it works. So I guess that's a positive. We've got about another 3 minutes and then we'll get started. But good to see you, Mike. I don't know if Mike and Tom, you guys have met each other. You'll definitely get to know each other a little bit more. But
we're old friends at this point.
Sounds good.
Absolutely.
Ollie apologizes, Colin.
It's all right. It's funny that this is the digital divide session we've had. I've said that's played into probably almost every single person's experience getting onto this platform. It's a great platform once you're on, but
yeah,
there's been it's worked on some, on some browsers, but not others. It's been varying levels of success for people to get on.
He's in a remote area of Riverside County.
Well, you mentioned tribal, so I figured that would
it's
be
a reservation, and he's had difficulty before communicating from there, and he'll drop on and off, and just decided, let's not do it today on this.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. So we'll get started in about 2 minutes. If you'd like, feel free. I'm gonna mute myself real quick. Well, actually, Tom and I think Andrea sent it to you, but you have the link for later as well, correct?
The link for later.
So I'll send you an email.
Okay.
When we're done with this, you're going to want to completely close the window and click the other link.
Okay.
I won't bog you down with the details, but that's as long as you do that, you'll be perfectly fine. So let me make sure that I get that link to you. Feel like we need either elevator music or somebody telling jokes, but I will I'll stay away from the jokes. I don't want anybody leaving the session because of
Colin,
my 8-year-old.
Isn't there
8-year-old says I have horrible jokes.
isn't there one other person joining the panel?
So that was one of the things. There is one other person. I wasn't going to be joining it originally. That was what Tom was mentioning. He's, I was going to say off the reservation. He's on a reservation and has poor reception there. So Tom will be, they're the same company. So Tom will be on the panel. I'll be moderating it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I didn't want to be the only one of the panel.
Oh, you're fine.
I'm going to be talking about earthquakes and resilience and that kind of stuff. And I'm glad you're here, Colin, because I'll give you a prop for the resilience advantage.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining this morning. By now, this should be the third session you've attended, and it's on resiliency in the face of energy. I will kind of give a high level of the purpose of this session and what the thoughts were. Businesses have shown great versatility and resiliency over the last 18 months. From mandated closures, policy changes, and increased costs, businesses have had to adapt and recreate themselves for years. This has led to businesses making preparation against future emergencies and challenges to their business. Among these preparations are those surrounding energy and resiliency against natural disasters such as earthquakes, floods, and fires. Our panel will speak about the nexus of this and what the future holds for resiliency and energy. So with that, I'm joined today by Tom Robinson, who's Senior Advisor with Optimum Seismic, Inc. And I'll let him give you a little bit more about his background, as well as Mike Harriel, who is the Senior Public Affairs Manager for Southern California Gas. So welcome. I'll turn it over to you first, Tom, to give me a little bit more about your background and kind of the work with Optimum as it relates to resiliency.
Thank you, Colin. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And as you know, I'm standing in for Ali Sahabi, who is away at a client meeting, and he's sort of past the digital divide, does not have a good connection today. My own background is I'm a former city manager. Spent 40 years working for 4 different cities in Southern California. More than 20 of those years, I was responsible for emergency services and emergency preparedness, and even a volunteer fire department in one of the cities. So I've got a range of experiences related to emergency preparedness and what has become now known as resilience.
Sorry, this mute button again. It's in a different spot. Mike, same thing. Give us a little bit more background and the work that you're doing with regards to resiliency and energy.
Thank you, Colin. Really glad to be here. My name is Mike Harriel. I'm Senior Public Affairs Manager for SoCal Gas. I've been with the gas company now, it'll be 33 years, coming up on 33 years. And I'm unique as a public affairs manager because I started from the very bottom. I hired in with the company as a probationary crew member, worked on gas mains, gas services, doing a lot of the field work, and worked my way up through management to my current position. So I have a fairly good understanding of what we do, why we do it, the importance, and all the safety aspects. In my current position, I'm the liaison, the company liaison to elected officials, legislators, nonprofits, business organizations, and just the general public to provide answers and information regarding questions related to energy and resiliency. This is a very timely topic. It's something that's very much on the forefront. resiliency, and reliability. So I'll be sharing information about those.
Wonderful. Well, you kind of gave me a great lead into my first question, resiliency. So, there's quite a few buzzwords or phrases we've heard during the pandemic. You've heard digital divide, you've heard pivoting, you've heard you're muted. But in this case, in terms of resiliency, how would you describe or define resiliency? So I'll start with you, Mike, and then I'll go to you, Tom.
Generally, the term resiliency refers to the ability of the power grid to withstand and recover from events that otherwise would lead to power outages. So these could be significant reliability events, some which you mentioned, Colin, earthquakes, floods, storms, in other parts of the world. It could be hurricanes. In our region, we're more familiar with power interruptions to mitigate wildfire risk or blackouts. And all of these can result in transmission level outages. So resiliency is how prepared we are for these events when they occur.
Definitely makes sense. Tom, same thing.
Actually, if you go on the line and you look and do a search for resilience, you'll find hundreds of thousands of references to it. And it's developed as a term over the last maybe 40 years. But this morning, I just wanted to share one from the Webster's Dictionary. Let's start there. Resilience is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And what I'd like to do is think of that in the context of natural disasters. And I'll give you one more definition. Urban resilience, the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a city to survive, adapt, and grow, no matter what kinds of chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience. Chronic stresses and acute shocks. So when we're talking natural disasters, that's the acute shock, whether it's an earthquake or a wildfire or a tornado or whatever it might be. And our organizations, institutions need to be prepared to deal with those things so that they can recover quickly. We don't want to be Christchurch in New Zealand that a decade after a significant earthquake in their downtown area is still not recovered. We don't want to be San Francisco that really 6 decades after their earthquake in 1906 was still adjusting to and picking up the pieces from. We've done that. We've seen that. We can do better.
So I appreciate both comments here, and I'm going to pick on the second one in terms of how quickly we rebound or recover. And I think both Tom and Mike, you guys are in the line of work where you're assisting businesses and residents go from said event to recovery. What would you say, I guess, currently the work that either Optimum, Seismic, or SoCalGas is doing to address resiliency? So, Mike, you mentioned about more along the lines of fire, but I would even say demand on the grid, and particularly in California. I know, SoCalGas, particularly in the region, I know SoCalGas has a fairly good size footprint throughout Southern California, but speaking more to the West Side region, and the same thing for Tom. So we'll start with you on that one, Mike.
Start with me or Tom?
Start with you, Mike. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So SoCalGas, we're a utility and we're a provider of energy, and so we're encouraging an integrated approach where we want to promote system resiliency while preserving the consumer choice to minimize disruptions in costs and to help reach the state's climate goals. And so I just kind of want to elaborate a little bit. Resiliency in the energy system is critical. By maintaining a diverse energy portfolio, California can minimize interruptions. Communities that are over-reliant on just one source of energy, they're not being resilient, and they risk losing critical tools needed for emergency response. And so when you mandate one source of energy over another, not only are you limiting your resiliency, but you're taking away that consumer choice. And Californians could be forced to make costly upgrades or retrofits and switch out appliances if those mandates come into effect. But Californians should be able to enjoy a choice of energy best suited for their business or lifestyle, especially if it can be done in an environmentally friendly way. And of course, the trend that we're seeing moving forward is a low carbon future. Decarbonization is a good thing, but decarbonization does not mean choosing one energy source over another. Decarbonization requires investing in carbon intensity reductions across all economic sectors, which include renewable electricity, renewable gases, and other technologies. And there are several options available to decarbonize now while maintaining that resiliency without disruption and cost increases. And many of the experts agree that buildings and businesses and industries with more than one type of energy is more resilient to extreme weather events and disasters.
Thank you, Tom. Same question to you.
Thank you, Colin. For more than a year, Optimum Seismic has been working with the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, LA County Business Federation, the U.S. Resiliency Council, and the LA County Economic Development Corporation on a series of webinars called the Resilience Advantage. Optimum Seismic has sponsored that series. And Colin, I want to thank you for your input, which led us to putting it into a webinar format even before COVID. That was really helpful, and it made the difference this year and made it very successful. But that series has been intended to educate businesses, government officials, and others about what we can do to become more resilient as a state. And we've talked about a concept we call Resilience 2.0. I said a moment ago that we can do better. We've relied for many years on codes that were adopted long ago, and some of them have been updated from time to time. But we need to go beyond the codes. We can do better by developing things that go beyond what was written as a minimum standard to protect life in structures. Basically, codes are set up to get you safely out of a building today in an earthquake situation. But those buildings after that earthquake may not function. They may have to be destroyed if they don't collapse during the quake. By building better buildings for the future, we can avoid that experience. And by retrofitting existing buildings more securely, they can withstand those types of events. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to modify behavior throughout the state. And we worked with more than 70 experts to produce that series. And all of them contribute a lot of good information. I'll just quickly touch on a couple of other points. Infrastructure is very critical to our friends at the gas company, providing lifeline services. They have a very difficult situation because they're not trying to protect one building. They're trying to protect thousands of miles of their distribution system. And quakes, fires, all those things can happen throughout their system, and they have to be able to adjust and respond quickly, and hopefully to have the systems more resilient before the event strikes so that they're not crippled afterwards. Incentives is another thing that we've talked about. We've worked with state officials to achieve some level of support, whether it's expedited permits or financial contributions or relief from tax measures to help building owners do the type of retrofits they need to do to protect their building and the people living in them. And I'll stop there.
Perfect. No, so now this is where we split a little bit. I've got a specific question for you, Tom, and then a specific one for you, Mike. But I'll start with you, Tom. You highlighted in terms of kind of retrofitting and soft story retrofitting, And Culver City just passed or had conversations at council meetings in the past to really look at the soft story retrofitting in Culver City. So my question, I guess, is somewhat two-part, because I know a lot of what you do is education-based for cities, for businesses, and for for your clientele. What would you say? Because I think most would agree that if they're being honest, in California, we're a matter of when, not if, in terms of a sizable quake. And I grew up through or lived in Whittier during the Whittier Narrows, and quite literally could see out through the front door, through the wall in the front of our house. And that was something that, it was it was a fairly good sized crack. And, uptown Whittier, when I lived, was all decimated, and it arguably took them 20 years to really build it back to some semblance of what it is. So how do you move the needle in terms of those that are hesitant to make some updates or changes because of the cost? Because obviously pandemic has been pretty detrimental as it relates to businesses specifically, and now having an additional cost for seismic retrofit. What do you, I guess, how do you address that, and what's the argument that you make there?
Let me start by congratulating Culver City for taking the steps towards an ordinance that will help make their community safer. I think that's very important, and for the chamber's efforts to support that enlightened measure. You mentioned soft story buildings. There's more than 100,000 soft story buildings in California. We project something like 2.5 million people live in those buildings. We know and have known for 50 years that those buildings can collapse in earthquakes. And only 5, Culver City will be the 5th in Los Angeles County of the 88 cities, are taking significant steps to protect those buildings and the people that live in them. So Culver City should be really, really congratulated for what it's doing. You mentioned cost. One of the things, the retrofitting of buildings and the construction of new buildings to higher standards is very affordable. On the new buildings, you're probably talking 1 to 3% of the cost of the building would be an additional cost to make that building withstand an earthquake and be usable after. So it's a really good idea. And one of the things we need to think about is we've been through a pandemic, right? And it brought us to our knees.
Yep.
Okay. And it hurt a lot of businesses. We didn't have to deal with physical destruction of our community. We had a social disruption, we had an economic disruption, but we didn't have on top of that the physical disruption that comes with an earthquake. We've had wildfires, that's true. Areas of the state have experienced that, but those haven't generally been in the urban areas. So we have to prepare for those cascading effects of multiple disasters that can occur in a relatively short time frame.
I appreciate that. I'm just for clarity, I know what this means. Excuse me. I know what this means, and I know that there's probably at least one person in our room that's sitting there kind of scratching their head. When you say soft story, what type of a building is that?
It's the best example would be an apartment where the tenants park underneath the building, and there's a little spindly pole that holds up the unit on top of the parking space. And those poles will hold up the building, but when they begin going laterally sideways, they collapse, and then the building comes down on top.
Thank you for that. And so I'm just to kind of summarize, obviously, mitigating the risk of loss of life is critically important. But one thing that you alluded to, but I want to make crystal clear, is the capabilities of getting back to living in a space, getting back to working in a space at all, if not quicker, because of these retrofit types of actions. So I that was part of the reason when Ali and I spoke initially, why I thought the kind of platform of what you guys are trying to do was important to make it a webinar so it was available to more people. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper on that in a few minutes, but I've got a question for Mike as we talk about resiliency. You alluded to this a little bit earlier in terms of having a balanced portfolio, and I couldn't agree with you more. I have conversations, for example, with restaurateurs that have specific recipes that are carved around gas grilling and gas appliances. California, however, is a state that is pushing in a lot of ways to electrify a lot of things. So, in your best, I guess, response, why is that something that I mean, I can venture a guess of why SoCal Gas wouldn't be a fan of that, but from a practicality, cost, overall future reliability, what would you say to that argument, and why maybe it's not the full story?
I mean, we're not resistant to electrifying. Electrification is good, but it's not the entirety. In order for us to reach our climate goals and to help sustain ourselves, it is a balance. It's a balance of all the different sources of energy that are available. And so I think one thing that you're going to see in California as the future, it's renewables. Renewables are out there, they're available, and they're clean. So, we have solar, we have wind, we have hydrogen, we have renewable natural gas, we have microgrids, we have fuel cells, and these are all viable, renewable sources of energy that will promote resiliency and also help California reach its climate goals. But each one of these is just one small piece of a very large pie in terms of a long-term solution. So one of the things that we're doing at SoCal Gas, we have a mission to build the cleanest, safest, and most innovative energy company in America and achieve those net zero greenhouse gas emissions in our operations and our delivery of energy by 2044. And one of the ways that we're being innovative is we're partnering with the scientific community and developing new technology and new products that will lead us into the future. Some of those being an electrolyzer, which is a device that produces green hydrogen from water and renewable electricity. We have a hydrogen demonstration house that we're going to be building, which will display the next generation of technology, incorporating an electrolyzer, battery, solar, and fuel cell, and renewable natural gas. So it's the perfect house for the future. We're also working on funding research and development of hydrogen and hydrogen fuel for commercial transportation, which is really a very large sector that's producing greenhouse gases. So it's something that we're looking at. And also, we don't just talk about these things, but we actually incorporate them into our process. So we have 2 microgrids that are up and running now at 2 of our company facilities. And these microgrids will be there. If power goes out, we will be able to sustain. And also I wanted to mention a couple of years ago, we actually released a study on lessons in resiliency planning to help communities and utilities prepare for disasters. And today, many of those industries are following these recommendations. And all of these are just a demonstration on how we want our commitment to be an industry leader in maintaining resiliency, maintaining reliability, and reaching those climate goals. So it includes electricity, it includes hydrogen, it includes renewable natural gas. What we don't want to see is a mandate, because then you're taking that resiliency away. And as you mentioned with restaurateurs, some of their process is cooking with natural gas. Some restaurateurs have a process cooking with electricity. Both of those entities need to have a choice on their source of energy so that they can produce their product. And we shouldn't mandate one or the other. We should, continue with that opportunity to choose.
Thank you very much. I've got a question now again for both of you. Going back to cost, because I do think there was a saying that I don't remember who told me years ago, that people are pushed by problems till they're pulled by vision. And that plays into a lot of part of our reactionary ways. I mean, I don't think anybody really had a choice during the pandemic. That was not anything that most people saw coming. So we were reactionary there. But the increased demand on the grid is something that is very easy to see. And we've seen the result of it, of relying too much on one energy source versus another. We've seen the need to continually adapt and build the technologies to support the growing demands. And on the retrofit and development side, we've seen the need to have resilient structures that can house and hold employees to do a lot of the work in our states. So I'm going to go back to cost. Is there anything from an Optimum Seismic standpoint or SoCal Gas in terms of, here's somewhere to look at resources? I know SoCal Gas has a ton of programming and rebate programs. If you want to touch on some of those that might speak to businesses, but also residents, because most of the people that are on here live within the SoCal Gas service area. And then for Tom, in terms of those that would be looking at retrofitting or other projects in terms of resiliency, is there funding sources out there, or how have you guys been creative in addressing some of that? So I'm going to go to you first, Tom, since I just gave you the question.
Thank you. Thank you again, Colin. Cost is always an interesting discussion as you get into retrofitting of buildings. And there's a misconception that it's very expensive and it's not practical. And really the reality is that it is cost effective and it is practical. The National Institute of Building Sciences has done a study, and they show that the cost benefit of doing a retrofit to an apartment building would be in the area of $13 saved to $1 spent for retrofits. That's a significant benefit. There have been other studies by USC, Caltech, a variety of other organizations, and they all point to different numbers. But the bottom line is there is a significant benefit ranging from $4 to $13 on the high end. And that's without consideration of life safety.
Well, I would say that goes up exponentially when you include the life safety component.
And that's a good point that you're raising, because most people don't consider the fact that there is liability associated with deaths and injuries and earthquakes. The most recent court case on that point awarded $1 million per person for people killed in a building in Paso Robles. And that was upheld by the appeals court. So that's the law of the land now.
And I know I'm going to go to Mike in a second, but you just jarred my memory on something else. Our earlier session was on housing, jobs, and mobility, and the buzzword there is affordability, which on the west side might be an optical illusion. But can you speak to what retrofitting a building does, and what most of the time, if they're residential units, what type of housing that represents in the community?
Yes, the multifamily housing, the soft story buildings that we were talking about are generally older. They're 40 plus years old. And that is what we call naturally occurring affordable housing. Everybody wants to live in the newest, greatest, cleanest, best area, but not everybody can afford to. So people are often older, students, minorities are attracted to these older units that are at the greatest risk of collapse. And that's why, from a social equity standpoint, we believe that financial assistance should be made available to those owners to protect the 2.5 million people living in that type of building throughout the state.
Thank you for that. So that's, I mean, another argument. I know it was discussed at City Council that part of the reason they were moving forward with said ordinance is because it does represent, for Culver City, most, if not all, of our affordable housing units, or more affordable housing units. So appreciate you sharing that. Mike, I'm going to go to you. What resources are out there? Where should people be looking? And then I'll add a secondary question, since I did the same to Tom. For those that are maybe concerned or want to be able to voice their interest in having a balanced portfolio in terms of options for energy, where should they go? How are they able to engage folks?
When you first laid out the question, you mentioned cost, and I just wanted to touch on that briefly, that it's expensive not being able to respond to emergencies quick enough to protect life and property. We have to maintain our energy reliability, we have to retain efficiency, and we have to retain resiliency. And so we have to prepare for those extreme weather events that could affect delivery. Wildfires in California recent wildfires, they led to multi-day power outages affecting millions of customers, businesses, homeowners, and the millions of dollars lost when you think of hotels that couldn't house people, when you think of businesses that couldn't open. And even hospitals, these critical care centers that have to rely on backup power to save lives and to keep people healthy. And so we have to focus on making sure that we have a resiliency in our energy delivery. One way to do that is, as a consumer, a business person, we can start looking at generators, backup generators. There are natural gas generators that connect to your existing natural gas system. And when the electricity goes off, that generator will come on and create the electricity that you need to continue running. Fuel cells, microgrids, all of those are for homes and businesses in various sizes that can do the same thing. So those are things that we can rely on for resiliency. For the homeowners and the businesses, we have a lot of rebates on energy efficiency, appliances. We have a lot of programs. We have a lot of things that are free, especially for our seniors, to come out and inspect their living quarters, to do weatherization, to change out appliances. And a lot of these services are free. Of course, they're income-based. So I would recommend our website, socalgas.com. Go to the rebate section, and you'll find out information there. For the last comment, get involved on what your elected leaders are proposing. You don't want to have something just rammed down your throat. You want to be engaged and you want to be involved. And so that may mean participating in city council meetings, writing letters to your legislators, attending hearings, and actually just speaking out. We have that silent majority that doesn't say anything. And then when our quality of life is changed, then we want to speak out, but we need to speak out before that. So just be aware of what's going on and to voice your opinion, regardless of what it is. You have an opinion, you have a choice. We want to maintain that choice, and we want to hear your opinion.
Thank you for that. We're coming up on time, so we'll get to kind of a final thought here. Obviously, as an economic outlook or forecast, we try to look into the future, which, over the last few months, the crystal ball has been rather muddy. But if you were to look forward, what would be the parting thoughts you'd give to the audience in terms of preparing for the future? So from an Optimum Seismic perspective, what's something that you think is definitely coming, and what people should be paying attention to? So I'll start with you, Tom.
We know the big earthquake is coming. We just don't know when. What we urge people to do is to know your risks. Know where you live or where you do business, and what the ground underneath you holds. And then have your building analyzed by an engineer, a structural engineer, who can tell you the extent of the risks you face and what you can do about them. After you know, then you need to act to mitigate the types of problems that we saw last summer so clearly in Florida. You don't want that to happen to your building, whatever kind of building it is. So learn what your risks are, then act to fix them, and you'll be safer in the future.
Makes sense. Mike, same thing to you.
Yeah, Tom is right on point. We know that a major earthquake is coming one day. We know that, unfortunately, there may be another wildfire. We know that there may be a power outage due to the winds. And I understand why the power needs to be turned off, but we need to be prepared to handle that and to recover from that. A thing that happened to me this Thanksgiving, I had my power turned off, and I had no backup anything, and I felt a little foolish, but
do as I say, not as I do.
Right, but we have to prepare for these things because they're going to happen. We don't know when, and so starting to look at investing in that technology so that you can continue with your business, continue with your life, continue with your Thanksgiving meals or whatever it may be. But just be thoughtful and consider what you need for your particular business or home, so that you can sustain that power. But we also want to do it in an environmentally friendly way. And I can't stress that enough, because it's very important that we each participate in reaching climate goals. But that earthquake is going to come. That next power outage is going to occur, and we just need to be ready for it.
Well, I want to thank both of you for carving out time today. Again, great information. Extremely large topic of resiliency. Could have gone in any different direction in the face of energy, because there are, I would argue, many faces of energy. But I appreciate the insight you guys both gave today. I saw Tom drop his email in there. I don't know if Mike, you had a chance to do so as well. But if people want to follow up with you, I'd love for them to have that opportunity. Those of you that are joining us, we will now have a small break, and then shortly you'll see the stage will be illuminated to say live, and you'll also see the opportunity to join stage. We'll have our final introduction, which will be of Kevin Clouden with the Milken Institute of Regional Economics. He will give our economic outlook for the event, and then we'll wrap up. So I appreciate you guys if you've been with us for 3 hours. In some ways it's flown by, but if you've missed segments and you wanted to get back to them, we will be sending the links to all of the sessions, including the keynote on the back end. So fret not if you had to step away to take care of anything at your desk. So thank you again, gentlemen. And I will, Tom, I'll see you very shortly. And Mike, look forward to connect with you soon.
Alrighty. Thank you. Guys, take care.
Thank you all.